Hi again, guys. Welcome to tutorial 2. Go through marking scheme 1 and marking scheme 2. So let me get ready and get started. So let me share my screen and get right into that. Right, so here am I in our Google Classroom. Right, so I was doing something here that I have to finish. Right, but before I get into that, or complete that, what I'll do, I'll get into the grading scheme as I said. Right, so we have grading scheme 1, which is the first grading scheme, like I named it, first grading scheme 101. Here I allocated marks to the different parts of the first section of the portfolio, I would like to call it, or the first half. The cover page, title page, acknowledgements, table of contents, introduction, research, possible solutions. Right, and each one I gave different marks. So 2 for that, 2 for that, 3 for that, 3, 10, 8, 8, and so forth. On completion of these sections, which I mark off as individual, you will earn a total of 36 marks. Right, if you do all this properly, you'll get total 36 marks. And here you have a chosen solution, which is a group presentation. It's worth 14 marks, right? And the assigned groups are divided the class into 2, right? So in group 1, it has Arian Ramprasad, Kalim Leon, Alex Babula, Samantha Kanhai, Caroline Gopi, Kuli Awai, Tatiana Andrews, Priyanjali Sela. And in group 2, we have Christian Ramru, Anthony Cassie, Justin Manik, Jamie Dugan, Kyra, Jugun, Leora, Harry Prasad, Brianna Charles, and Daniel Fortune. Right? Now, these are some guidelines that I noted here for you guys to follow. Both the individual and group presentations are due on the 6th of May. So we don't have much time, as I said before, it's a short term, however, keeping it simple, sweet and simple, so that it's you're able to accomplish it. It's doable, right? The second criteria is such that the group presentation must entail these things: the two-way switch circuit, the standard that Trinidad and Tobago uses in terms of like electrical wiring, the coloring and whatnot, and what they mean. Schematic of a two-way switch circuit. So you have to draw a circuit using the electronic symbols for each component. Yes. Real life applications of this type of circuit. So you have to do some little research there in your group as to where you would find these sort of switches or circuits in the real world, right? And then a brief electrical safety precautions needed while you were building the circuit, right? So tell me, what were the safety measures you took so that you wouldn't get shocked, so you wouldn't get burned, so you didn't damage yourself, right? And the third and final note here is such that the group presentation, each group is allowed 12 to 15 minutes to present, right? And only 6 slides are allowed per presentation. But this may vary. I'll be lenient here. If it's more, let's say 8 or 10, I will be lenient. Once the presentation has all these 5 criteria in it, as well as it fits within the time frame of 12 to 15 minutes. Okay, so that was grading scheme 1. I want to focus on grading scheme 2 now, because I went through the entirety of the example portfolio, so I want to go through how I'm marking every part of that portfolio. So the second grading scheme, this will be for your final end of term, right? So when everything is completed, this is the second half you'll be working on after midterm. So the chosen solution is such that develop the project. chosen solution, evaluate project, testing, critical assessment of the project, evaluation of work, references, and appendix. And for each section, you saw that I gave different marks. So 10 for this, 10 for that, 10 for the other, and 4 for 2, right? As follows, right? And the due date for this one now will be, for the last part of the portfolio, will be the 3rd of June, right? So the notes I put here as well is such that at the end of the portfolio, I would like to see pictures of the finished product or the device built, right? And then the second thing here, like I mentioned before in tutorial 1, I like to see a video, but this is a 10-second clip of the device in operation. I want that when you play the video, I will see you operating switch 1 on and off to switch the light or the lamp on and off. Likewise, for switch 2, I like to see you flipping the switch and I see the light coming on and off respectively. Right? So these were the marking schemes or grading schemes for both of them. Right? Now for those of you that did not take a look at the video with regards to the two-way switching circuit, I would like to play it for you right now so that you could, see it if you did not get an opportunity to look at it for homework. Right? So this is the first switch. This first video is the circuit that we'll be looking at or building from. So pay attention and enjoy.
Hey there guys, Paul here from the engineeringmindset.com. In this video, we're going to be looking at how to control a light fitting with 2 switches. This is very useful, for example, when placing a light switch at the top and bottom of a set of stairs or at different doors in a room. We're going to look at 2 common ways to do this, as well as some different variations on the second version. Now, the color of the cables varies around the world according to different standards. I'm going to be using the European color code for this video, but you should check your local regulations. I just want to remind you that working with electricity is dangerous. We're covering just the theory in this video, so please do not undertake any electrical work unless you are qualified and competent. So, to control a light with 2 switches, we of course need 2 switches which have 3 terminals on the back. I'll leave some links in the video description down below for where to buy these switches online very cheaply. The name for these type of switches is different depending on where in the world you are. The US and North America call these 3-way switches, but the EU calls these 2-way switches. The switch can only be flipped one of 2 ways, either up or down. But if we look at the back of the switch, then we'll see there are 3 terminals, and that means there's 4 ways for electricity to flow through the switch. These will all depend on how the switch is wired. One terminal is called the common, and then we have a terminal called line 1, and another terminal called line 2. Let's say we want to control this light fitting using 2 switches. I'll flip them over so you can see how this would work. I'll also just rotate these to make the drawing a little easier to understand. So we have the electricity coming in from the consumer unit and feeding the light fitting. We therefore take the live wire and divert this into the common terminal of switch 1. We run another wire from the common terminal of switch 2 and connect this to the lamp. We now need to connect the 2 switches, so we connect terminal L1 of switch 1 with terminal L2 of switch 2. We need to place a ground sleeve at each end of this wire to warn that it is intermittently live. We then run another wire from terminal L2 of switch 1 and connect this to terminal L1 of switch 2, again placing a brown sleeve to indicate that this can be live. At the moment, the electricity can make it through switch 1 and into switch 2, but the circuit is broken at switch 2. If we then flip the switch, the circuit is complete, so electricity runs through the entire circuit and the lamp lights up. If we then flip switch 1, the circuit is broken again, so the lamp turns on. But electricity still flows to switch 2 where the circuit is broken. We could flip switch 1 again to complete the circuit, or we can flip switch 2 and the circuit is also complete. So we can therefore flip either switch 1 or switch 2 to make or break the circuit and thus control the light fitting with 2 switches. The second common way to control a light with 2 switches is to convert a 1-way switch into a 2-way. Again, we need 2 switches and you need to check the back to ensure that they have 3 terminals on each. If your one-way switch only has 2 terminals, then you need to replace this. So we cut the live wire feeding the lamp and run this into terminal L1 of switch 1. We then run a grey wire from terminal L1 of switch 1 to terminal L2 of switch 2. We need to place a brown sleeve at either end to warn that this is intermittently live. We run a brown wire between the 2 common terminals of both switches. Then we run a black wire from terminal L2 of switch 1 to terminal L1 of switch 2. Again, we need to place a brown sleeve at each end to warn that this is intermittently live. Lastly, to complete the circuit, we connect terminal L2 back to the supply for the light fitting. Again, using a brown sleeve to warn that it is intermittently live. The electricity can now flow and it will pass through switch 1 and into switch 2 where the circuit is broken. If we flip switch 2, we complete the circuit so the electricity can flow through the common and out into the lamp. If we flip switch 1, we break the circuit to the light fitting so the lamp turns off. If we then flip switch 2, we make the circuit again, electricity will flow to the light fitting. So the alternative ways work almost identically to the conversion we just saw. In this method, we run the live to L2 of switch 1. Then we run a brown cable from L2 of switch 1 over to L1 of switch 2. Then we run the grey wire from L2 of switch 2 over to L1 of switch 1. We need to place a brown sleeve at each end to warn that this is intermittently live. Then we run a black wire between both commons of both switches. Again, we need to place a brown sleeve at each end. Finally, we connect the blue wire from L1 of switch 1 back to the light fitting, again placing a brown sleeve at each end. So to start with, the circuit is broken, so electricity passes through switch 1 and into switch 2, but it reaches a dead end. If we then flip switch 1, we complete the circuit and electricity can flow through switch 1 and into switch 2, then back to switch 1 and up into the lamp. If we flip switch 2, we break the circuit, electricity just flows between the 2 switches and doesn't reach the light. If we flip switch 1, then electricity will flow to switch 1 and over into switch 2, across the switch, back over to switch 1, or it can flow to the light fitting. On the third variation, I won't animate the lines being connected for this one as you get the idea, but we connect the live to L1 of switch 1. Then we run a brown wire between L1 of switch 1 to L1 of switch 2. Then we run a grey wire between L2 of switch 2 and L2 of switch 1. Then we run the black wire between the 2 commons, and finally we connect a blue wire between L2 of switch 1 and then the lamp. Remember to add a brown sleeve at all the cables to warn that they are intermittently live. The fourth variation is very similar to the last one, except that the black wire is connected between the 2 L1s of both switches, and the brown wire is connected across the 2 commons. Again, remembering to place a brown sleeve on the wires to indicate that they are intermittently live. Okay guys, that's it for this video, but to continue your learning, just click on one of the videos on screen now and I'll catch you there for the next lesson. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course, check out theengineeringmindset.com.
Okay, so that was the end of the video with regards to the 4 versions of the two-way switching circuit, right? So I'm glad that you were able to take a look at it. Now, if you did not before, so this is the end of tutorial 2.